afternoon, good evening, good morning. My name is Julie Cohen. I am an executive coach and the CEO of Work Life Leader, an executive coaching, training, and leadership development company. And I'm thrilled that you are here today for Work Life Leader Live. So if you are new to this broadcast, I love to have conversations with interesting people at the intersection of work, life, and leadership. And today's topic is about caring for our parents and balancing everything else in our lives. So I want to tell you a little bit about so this broadcast I started actually during the pandemic in 2020. And then this is our second show after about an 18-month hiatus. And what took me away from my regular broadcast schedule was caring for my parents, Sue and Joel Cohen. And my guest is also dealing real time with what feels like full-time care of her parents, trying to sustain work and fitting everything else in between. So as many of us arrive at the pinnacle of our careers and our highest earning potential, aging parents often need massive emotional, physical, and professional support. And it's a huge toll as we manage through it. So I want to introduce my guest, Colleen Bracken, and I'll bring her on and then I'll tell you a little bit more about her. Hi, Colleen.
Hi.
So as two executive coaches struggling with these same issues, we're going to take a coach approach to this discussion. We're going to be asking each other coaching questions and asking you coaching questions to help you think through how you want to navigate through this challenging time of your life, whether you're dealing with it now or in the future, or if you've already dealt with it and you have some wisdom to share. But before we get to that, I do want to introduce Colleen. Colleen is a senior executive coach and group facilitator in the healthcare sector and a respected, very respected leader in the professional coaching community. Colleen lives a bicontinental lifestyle between New York, where her parents live, and her home in her husband's native country of Denmark. For the past 5 years, Colleen has been helping to care for her elderly parents, who I've had the honor to meet, and who both are suffering from dementia. She also happens to be one of my closest friends. So we've had many, many, many conversations over these past years about how to manage in the midst of what we're calling the caring conundrum. So we're excited to invite you to be part of this conversation. So we're going to get started. So how I've always started these conversations, if you've seen us before, is what I call an icebreaker. And it's really a question about this topic so you can hear from our guest, from me, and also we want to hear from you. So I'm going to have Colleen answer this question first, and then we're going to start hopefully getting your comments if you're watching us live, and then I'll share. So Colleen, tell us about your parents and how you care for them.
My parents are Dick and Jerry Bracken, and I want to give a shout out to them. They've been fabulous parents, vivacious people involved in the community, gave birth to 6 children within 8 years. Gives you a sense of who my mother is and was. And in 2020, my mother began showing really strong signs of a personality change. In her case, it was a strong sense of anxiousness and anxiety. And a lot of people just attributed it to the pandemic. But we all knew that's just not the way she reacted to life in the past. So that's where the signals began that something was really going wrong. Her mother also had Alzheimer's disease, and it did turn out that my mother was soon diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. My father is 5 years her senior. So right now my father's 90, almost 92, and my mother is 87. We started to care for my mom. I moved from my 22-year home of Philadelphia, where my whole community was, and this home that I loved. And I worked a lot at the University of Pennsylvania hospital system and campus, and went to school there and so on. And I made the decision, along with my supportive husband, that we would return to our native New York, right outside of New York City, to support my parents. We did have the help of my brothers and sisters, but we were in a certain situation where we were able to be more mobile. So we moved here to New York, and we moved in with my parents. We did that for a couple of years. Over that time, my mother, of course, declined, and my father also developed stronger signs of dementia. At this point, 6 months ago, we moved out of their house into an apartment of our own, just 10 minutes from there. And now we share caregiving responsibilities with my brothers and sisters, and we also have some professional help. So later on, I'll talk more about.
Yeah. It's again, as I know, as Colleen shared and I shared, we know each other well. I've experienced Colleen's just really life-changing, just what she's given her family and her parents by really just uprooting completely to care so fully for her parents. So with that, I do want to, before I answer the question, I want to hear from anyone who's watching live. So it is Tuesday, April 15th. Colleen and I are both on the East Coast of the United States, so it's a little after 4:30 p.m. So if you're here with us live on any platform, we'd love to hear from you. What is your relationship, if any, to this topic? If and how you've cared for your parents? And we'd love to hear just a little bit about it. So if you could share that in your chat box. And if you are live, please put #live. We'll be connecting, and I see already two guests are here, Nancy Harris and Bill Hyman. It's great to see you both. I know both of you have had challenges, significant also with your parents. So I know you understand what Colleen and I are talking about. So yeah, so if you haven't commented yet, we'd love to hear from you and to share, your experience. So I will share a little bit about mine. In that my parents are and were a little older than Colleen. My intense caring started around a similar time, around 2020. Actually, a little before. My father was starting to decline physically, and he needed to move out of my parents needed to move out of their current condo that they lived in for 20 years. Because it was hazardous for my father physically. And my husband and I were up, we're driving 30, 40 minutes, 3, 4, 5 or more times a week. Their ability to care for their dog was starting to get difficult. We were up there a lot for that. Moved them 6 minutes from our house, which was during the pandemic. We did that move in a matter of, 5 or 6 weeks, which kind of emptying out 20 years of stuff was quite a challenge. They stayed there for 3 years at this apartment. It was just a public apartment. And a year or two into that, my father had a full hip replacement, been hospitalized 2 or 3 times. And then my mother started showing signs of significant depression and then dementia. And without going into an entire textbook of medical maladies of, 2 people in their late 80s and early 90s. About 16 months ago, I moved them both into an assisted living facility, and their decline continued. My mother moved into memory care. My father started physically declining. The last year was basically constant hospitalizations and doctor's appointments, and my father did die after a really, really hard year in November. And my mom is stable now in memory care, but the toll that took on me with, again, physical, with some serious I've had serious illnesses in the last 2 years, emotional, family challenges, and professional have been significant, which we will talk about. But it looks like we have a lot of guests here, so I want to just say hello to a few folks. Besides Nancy and Bill, Lisa Kramer, Jill Handy, Kim Pele, we know that name. Nancy shared, and her father passed away in 2021. Kara Exner, hey, we got some Canadian representation, which we're your friends. We are your friends, and we love you, Canada. And we have Christopher Bloor on the East Coast. Your folks are in LA trying to figure out how to best support them. Yes, we'll definitely talk about that. And then Susan Wainwright, thanks for doing the session. Cared for dad with dementia, with siblings and mom until he passed away. Now caring and supporting our mom through her dementia. So yeah, we both, Colleen and I both get that. So let's move on. We're going to start with some questions. And again, you can ask questions as we go. And we're going to keep coming to you to answer questions and share questions. And also we're going to be giving coaching approaches to things too. So we do want to acknowledge Colleen and I are experts on our lives and our experiences with our parents. We are not experts on, how to do this the quote unquote right way. We figured out the way that has worked for each of us. And we want to talk a little bit about that with you. All right. So first question, Colleen.
Yeah.
My podcast and my company is called Work Life Leader. What's the impact of your caring responsibilities on your work?
Yeah. It's been huge. It's been huge. I'm able to work virtually with a lot of my clients, most of my clients, and that's been nice. And that's one of the reasons why my husband Kim, who's also on the watching, so hope you jump in, Kim, at any time, because we've been a team in this. That's why we were able to have the flexibility to move here to New York from Philadelphia, and do that. Even that being said, the impact on my work has been, I would say the first thing is disruptive and distracting. That's what it is. Disruptive in the very, Julie, you know how this is, or anyone who's done this, in the very pure sense of, in the past, nothing would interrupt a client meeting or a meeting I was on, and everything would shut down. And now I'm constantly with my phone in front of me. And it's not infrequent that I get a call from our caregiver or my father or a sibling or something happens. Something happens and I have to address that right there. So it's been disruptive in that sense. And it has been just the scheduling around it. And I've had to reduce a lot of my work. And I'll pause there. And I said two things.
Yeah. So a couple of things that you said, and then I have a couple comments from our guests. So I want to keep making sure we come back to you. And again, we'd love to hear from you how caring for your parents has impacted, your work. And just to reintroduce, this is Work Life Leader Live. We're talking about the caring conundrum, supporting aging parents and managing your work and life. And my wonderful guest is my dear friend, Colleen Bracken, from Bracken Leadership. So there's a couple things that you highlighted that I think are really important. And I feel like we need to acknowledge this. You talked about your husband, and you have a team with your siblings. I also was extremely privileged of having a partner. My husband has been my partner through this, and even I have some dear friends who, and one of them is on this call, who took significant care responsibilities. Some that people might have felt was very small, but was so powerful. And so we're aware that is a privilege that we have partners, because there's a lot of people who are doing this who don't have partners, and also that we have our own businesses. So we're coming at this again from a very privileged place, because we don't have to ask our boss, can I have time off? And I have multiple clients who do, and have had to, leave jobs that they've loved, or, taken significant, job responsibility and salary cuts. So I just want to acknowledge that as we're discussing that, we're coming from that place. I think you hit it spot on, Colleen, the issue of disruptive and distracting. And again, and I think we're similar in that someone who prides themselves as being always together, always on top, extremely responsive. The last 2-3 years, it was the first time, my clients didn't come first. My work didn't come first. And I had to communicate differently. So when we talk about things that we can do in advance, is that I had to let people know in advance that these things might happen. And if someone hired me, this is kind of part of my mix right now. And let people know upfront. So let's get some comments. I will read some here. So Jill Handy, who's also live here, she cares for twin aunts who are 92 and live together in Alabama. And she lives in Houston. So she's back and forth periodically to manage their home health care. And I think Christopher talked about, he's on the East Coast and his parents are in LA. So Jill has this similar, very long distance kind of caring, relationship. Her aunts have mobility and memory issues, and the family that is close by in where her aunts live are not helpful. So it's very challenging for her and her mom, who is their sister, who is 81 and also has mobility issues. So again, I think Jill's example just shows how unique, what caring looks like. And again, we're focusing on caring for aging. There's a whole level of, if you're doing this and you have children. I have a 22-year-old who, although he's a senior in college, has a lot of care and needs as he graduates. So, again, we're looking really specifically. Nancy said it felt like a roller coaster when my dad was in decline. Yeah, both again, emotional, physical, all of the facets of our lives.
Nancy, I use the roller coaster emoji.
Yeah,
more than any other emoji.
Yes, it was actually. I can attest to that, Colleen. It wasn't just the little emoji. It was this wee, and it was like her with her arms up on a roller coaster. I have many of those in text change. So Bill asked a couple questions, which actually are some of our questions. So I'm going to read some of them. We'll answer one, and then we'll keep moving forward. So Bill's questions are: how has taking care of aging parents changed you? And what advice do you have of taking care of yourselves while caring for others? So those are actually, Bill, not surprisingly, you've hit on two questions that we're going to discuss. So why don't we start with, again, what I had is, how do you sustain yourself? How do you take care of yourself during this? Colleen, do you want to start? And then again, we'd love to hear from you. And I know from the folks who've shared, you're in this in the midst. And I know some of you are kind of, dealing with, kind of the grief of after our parents pass. We'd love to hear how you've managed to take care of yourself. So please share that while Colleen, and then Colleen's going to share her thoughts.
That's the thing that everyone says. And of course, it makes so much sense. And the whole metaphor of the oxygen mask and all that stuff. But I will say that sometimes when people would say, well, make sure you're taking care of yourself, I wanted to scream and be like, okay, if you want me to take care of myself, could you come and go grocery shopping then? Could you please? It can feel really impossible. It's the challenge was on so many levels, and it's now a little relieved. So I think sometimes but for the time being, because the bottom will fall out again. But the idea of trying to take care of myself when I felt completely overwhelmed, I would say the way that I got through that part was walking. I took a lot of walks, actually. I needed to get outside. I'm an exercise person. And so that was absolutely fundamental to me, was getting out, getting my head, listening to something that wasn't about aging or caring for elders, and walking around the lake, walking on the Hudson River. That was essential to me, and trying to have some fun and some time with my husband in the moments that we could. What about you, Julie? How did you do it?
Yeah, so similarly, intellectually, I tried to take care of myself. I tried to keep my yoga practice going, which I did at home anyway. So I would really, when I woke up, I tried to do my yoga and tried to sustain exercising. But honestly, what I found, and again, this was, the caring intensified the past 5 years, but the last, 18 months, it just never shut down. And so it's not to get political, but it's kind of like now I wake up every morning with the dread of what is happening in America. If I made it through the night, I woke up thinking, okay, did I miss a call? Did I sleep through a call? And when's the first call going to be? Because at the height of some of my dad's physical issues, there were days he called me 40 times, and that's 40. I was his everything, and he was living in assisted living, so there were people around him.
Yeah.
So the only time I felt like that there was some decompression, and again, another thing Colleen and I have in common is our partners we're not born in the US. And so when we went at Christmas time to England to visit my husband's family, I couldn't do anything. And so once I got on that plane for those like 10 days, it took about 3 days for me to actually like not be constantly thinking about them. And still, I had, so, Christopher is talking about this topic is front of mind as my 84-year-old mother is declining and my dad, same age, is bearing all the weight of her care. Again, coming from a place of privilege, as I started seeing my parents declining, I reached out to a geriatric social worker who would help me. And so like when I left the country, this caregiver woman, social worker, she became me while I was away. And so that was the reason why I could leave. And actually, when I was out of the country, and it was out of the zip code. Like if I had if I got on a plane and went to a conference, I knew I wasn't, I needed to, unless one of them was going to had died, I wasn't going to be coming back. Someone else was going to be taken.
I mean,
so I wish, to Bill's question and to Christopher's, to Bill's question, self-care has been really hard. And it's almost like you chisel out a little bit where you can. But to me, what was more is getting people around to support. And sometimes that's really, really hard.
I can't separate the self-care from the getting. There's support. Like I feel I'm blessed. There's a lot of people that are supportive. What I need is help. That's different. Someone to actually step in and take over and do some things. And that might mean, please just go visit my parents. Just go there for half an hour. So that was one thing is just help us with that. The other thing I think was helping was good to know was that you reminded me of when you said you got a geriatric social worker is I want to give a big shout out to the Alzheimer's Association. The Alzheimer's Association is just rich with resources and connections. I go to a support group every 2 weeks. I've been going there for over 2 or 3 years now. So now I know the people. This is a long journey. It's often years and years. So that's hard. And I try to stay in the present moment. That helps me. Getting that support is very helpful and getting actual help. Yeah. Finally, I would say about boundaries, and this is something that Julie talks a lot about in her work. It's part of the Work Like Leader curriculum and so on. I needed to set some boundaries for myself around when I take their calls or kind of sharing it with my brothers and sisters, or this is good enough for my parents. Like this is good enough. They're safe, they're clean, they're comfortable. That has to be enough for right now.
Yeah.
That's been ongoing.
Yeah. And so, therein lies, so one of the things, we're going to talk about is how, well, I don't want to switch this question because you said something really important that I want to highlight is that I know my expectations of myself had to change over the journey. In that I couldn't be there for every single need, because as my parents aged, especially my father, because my father was declining physically, not cognitively, and I was his rock, and I was his best friend during this time. His world became smaller and smaller, so I was his outlet. And so there were times where I couldn't answer the phone anymore. I explained it to him, but he kind of forgot. And that was really difficult. Like, I cried many a night, like, "Ugh, I feel bad I didn't pick it up all the time." And so it's really understanding. And Nancy just mentioned this, is I did not do the best job, and it led to feelings of burnout. Actually still feel that way. What has helped is yoga, meditation, nature walk, time with loving friends and family. I know my dad died in November. I thought, oh, by January, end of November, I thought, oh, by the beginning of January, I'm going to be back to, 100% or at least 90%, because my mother's care needs are so different right now. And I am still recovering. And it is, I think, physiologically life-changing, and all these other things. So I don't, when Nancy says that, I don't know if we're ever going to be back to where we are, because I also think it's aging. Like, we're at this stage, I don't know how old I know how old a lot of people actually are on this, but I'm 57. And so from like 52 to 57, I just got beat down. And, it's like, I want to get my energy back, but it's not coming back the way I want it to be. So we got a couple more questions, then we'll keep going. First of all, I want to reintroduce Colleen Bracken, who is an executive coach and the owner and CEO of Bracken Leadership. I'm Julie Cohen, CEO of Work Life Leader, and this is Work Life Leader Live. And we're talking, as I can see by all the comments, about a really relevant topic. And we will keep going until we've got about 15 minutes left. We said we're going to keep going till 1:15, but we will continue and do a part 2, or because obviously this is an important topic for a lot of us. But Jill Handy is, I've learned to ask for specific help. Yes, Colleen, my family didn't offer, but when I asked for a specific block of time and gave directions for help, they gave it. I took what I could get. So Jill is highlighting a really interesting distinction. So yes, being specific of your needs is really valuable. One of the things that I wanted that I didn't get from some family members, which I wanted someone to take some responsibility off my plate. One exercise I did was I had a bunch of Post-it notes, kind of just like these. And one day I wrote down everything I did for my parents, like, over a week period of time. And I came up with, I think there was like 16 or 17 Post-it notes. And what I wanted to do was be able to give someone or some people a Post-it note, like, manage the podiatrist appointment. And I couldn't get that. So it was, I'll make the podiatrist appointment, you'll take him, and then maybe we'll meet at the office, and then I'll take him back to his apartment. But it's like, I wanted to talking to Christopher and others who are in this stage, getting distinct tasks off your plate can be really powerful, because not only is it time, it's cognitive energy. And that, to me, in some ways, was more draining than my time. I don't know, Colleen, if you felt that same way.
I think what it points to is this, we're talking about being on Work Life Leader, is this leadership aspect of it, or it can be. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and this speaker was saying about that you can be a team leader. In a sense, you are a leader on a caregiving team, but the difference is when you're a leader, you have some authority, you can delegate it. When you're one, in my case, there's 6 kids altogether, but we have another 7th essentially that joined us kind of along the way, that I don't really have the authority to delegate. It's like managing volunteers in a way, but yet is an interesting question to look at. What are the leadership aspects of doing this in the midst of always complex family dynamics?
Yeah. And, I think of sometimes, when I do work similarly when we're working with leaders, the issue of delegation. There's a lot of leaders who, at a certain level, are just like, oh, it's easier for me to do it myself. The time it takes for me to, teach my direct report to get it to the quality that I need it, and, we'll do coaching around that. What would it look like? What do you need to do? How do you need to let go? That is sometimes like asking a person to do this where there's going to be resistance, or it's like the stress and anxiety of the ask and the energy for that, and then the potential kind of emotional dissonance or disruption. Like, say, all right, I'll just take them. I'll just do it. And so that's another issue. Couple other comments. And I definitely want to get to Jill Chernikoff's question. Hi, Jill. It's good to see you.
Hi, Jill.
Kim mentioned, Kim Pele, I think self-care is somewhat of an illusion. So I do think, we kind of are right with you there. And there is always a level of anxiety, he continues to say. And I think that I felt that, I still feel that now, even though caring for my mother is very different. Caring for someone with dementia, for me, my mother, has been very different than caring with someone who is cognitively sharp but physically declining. Honestly, because both of my parents were in a safe space, in this assisted living facility, my mom's needs are met and she's content. My dad's needs, he felt they were never being met, and he was anxious all the time, and therefore I was anxious all the time. So yeah. Kim also said using an online platform, Family Wall, to coordinate care has really helped. So that's another thing is, maybe we'll talk about that. But there's another question that Jill asked that I want to get to before we have to wrap up, and I want to leave some time for some final comments before we hit the quarter after mark. So Jill asked, are you able to find meaning in the caregiving? Do you want to take that first, Colleen, and then others, if you want to share that great question.
I wish I could say yes.
Yeah.
I wish I could, but maybe I will after my parents pass. Right now, it feels important, but I'm not sure how meaningful it feels to me.
Yeah. So again, each of our relationships to this process is just as unique as we are. For me, again, both my parents were alive, up until November, and I was close with both of my parents. Had a very close relationship with my dad, especially in the last 5 years, because I started taking him to all of his doctor's appointments when he stopped driving, like at 86 or something. And there was a lot of, it was the closest relationship I've ever had with him. Like, we did a lot together. He was my kind of intellectual role model, sense of humor, partner. We had a lot of fun together. And so I really tried to make our time together fun for both of us. And one of the things, when we ask, and I think someone asked this, something, our last question is going to be, what kind of advice would you give for this? One of the things that I did with all this time, even as my dad was declining, was really just try to take it all in. I knew I was very clear with what he wanted. We never shied away from any conversation. Like, we talked about death a lot. He'd like to joke, like we joked, but then we would move into, how satisfied are you with your life? Do you have any regrets? What would you do differently? Did you love mom? I asked, all those questions that I've been curious about, and he asked me questions, and I knew he was going to die. Like, this wasn't, I was a realist. He was a realist. And so we just talked about it, and I knew what he wanted. And it kind of made his death just more like it was just we were going through it together. And I was with him when he died, and I stayed with him for like 3 hours afterwards till they came and picked him up. So yeah, to me that advice would just be talk. And you know, if your parent is cognitively, fairly sharp, you know, yeah, that gave me meaning. Is that I was with him. Um, it's a very different kind of meaning or relationship with someone who has dementia. It's much, yeah. So um, there's another comment. Would love to hear before we kind of wrap up this time. If anyone else in the audience, wants to share kind of how this had meaning for you, and anything else that happened to you during that process that helped sustain you. Nancy said, what made things difficult was my dad was ill during the pandemic. I still feel sorrow for not being able to spend time with him during his final days. We as a society underestimate the impact of the pandemic on that population. And Nancy also shared a resource, which will be in the comments on LinkedIn, that addresses grief in a holistic way. So that's really, yeah. And again, what I've seen is just how unique it is for each of us. So Colleen, as you think about, this continuation, I know your mom is declining, fairly quickly right now. What's one piece of advice, or what would be a gift you would give someone who's at the beginning of their parents' decline?
What I would say, one thing we did very, very well was we had something called a sibling summit, which was because of my experience as a facilitator. I brought all my brothers and sisters together and their spouses, and we had a 2-day, actually kind of retreat, where we talked about what was going on, and everyone had a chance to identify what they were good at, what they were capable of, how they could help. So some people were really good with money. They focused on the finances. Some people better with personal care, other people better on the spiritual side. So everyone had a chance to raise their hand and say, this is what I can do well. So I would say in terms of advice, if you have the kind of family that is willing and able to have those kind of conversations, many families are not. But if yours is, then I encourage you to try to do that so that people can identify how they can contribute. That's one thing. And the other one I would say is be in the present moment. That's also something that I've learned to be better at along the way. I used to be a super type A planner with always a plan B. And in this case, and now I've learned, I don't know how long this is going to take. I have no idea. So I need to just be in the moment. And some of those moments are horrible and terrible and painful and angering. And I need to know that I'm here in this moment now, but this could be very different an hour from now.
Right.
The crisis could have passed, right, Julie? Isn't that so true?
We know you turned off your phone for this hour. You don't know what you're coming back to, right? It was like, oh, I went out for dinner and I shut down for 2 hours. What is going to be waiting?
What is going to happen? Or if I'm in the midst of it, it's okay. My dad called 911 for himself the other day because he was tired. That's ultimately what happened. But the other thing is to be present to those little moments, even though they may be few and far between, that feel good. Yeah. Whether it comes from a sibling or a friend or your parent or a doctor or whoever it is, when you get that, pay attention to that, hold on to that.
Yeah. Well, that's beautiful. And I would just add, it is so complex, and all emotions are okay. I know I carried around a lot of anger and resentment to family members. I did some things that felt at the moment like such a relief, like letting it rip, as we might say, just sharing kind of that anger. with other people who probably wasn't me at my best, but at the moment it was a big relief. And looking back, I probably wouldn't change anything like around that. Like I needed to feel all those emotions, and I kind of stopped judging myself and just like, you know what, I got to do what I can do to get through this, and to yeah, to take care of them. Like that was that was my job. It really was my primary job. So what we didn't get to, which we could talk to, because there was a lot around, kind of the impact of actual work, kind of how my relationship with work changed,
Yeah.
and now how I'm thinking about work moving forward, because it's changed significantly. And Colleen, is there any other thing before we say goodbye? And I'm going to let people know how they can reach out to you. What are other things that if we're having a second, if we're having part two, what are the things we missed?
Yeah, well, first, definitely the relationship to work thing. Is work an escape? Is it another stressful obligation? Is it a place for fulfillment and self-expression? How do you do it logistically? What do you take? What am I taking from my life experience into work and vice versa? So I feel like that whole area is really essential. I think that covers it. I know there's a lot of other things, but that's what I got right
now. And so before we wrap up, and I'm going to ask Colleen how you can reach her, but I'd love to hear, what did we miss? Like, what open questions do you have? So please, if you have any in the next couple minutes, or come back to this anytime, add your questions. We check comments, I respond to comments, but it'll also help us, if Colleen and I speak again about this, it'll make us more focused. And also other guests, if there's other topics that are important to you, we want to hear that. And remember, Work Life Leader is about the intersection of work life and leadership. So with that, Colleen, thank you. And if people want to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
You can email me at colleen@brackenleadership.com.
Okay, and I'll put that in a comment on LinkedIn. So if you're watching this on LinkedIn, it'll be in the comments where you are. If you're watching it on another platform, you can visit on LinkedIn and see that. So again, I want to thank everyone. We had a robust discussion. Please share additional thoughts. And if you have other ideas, love to hear them. Some of the topics I have coming up is about, one is about building a strong culture in your organization. Another one that we have coming up is kind of career challenges for young women professionals, navigating pressure, priorities, and your path. And then also starting a movement, 10 years in an entrepreneurial nonprofit venture, and how to do that. So we have some really great guests coming up. So please stay in touch. Keep your eyes open on LinkedIn. And we love your participation, and take good care, and take care of yourself while you're taking care of others.
Yeah. Thanks everyone for being here. Thanks for the conversation.
Okay. Bye-bye.